All right, here we go. I'm going to try this again. Hopefully my Wi-Fi doesn't cut out this time. Trying to share this to as many people as I can, so bear with me for a second. All right. Ta-da, welcome, hello. Looks like some people are showing up. I'm going to give it like 2 minutes. We're going to start the conversation. I hope everybody is wonderful and beautiful and healthy out there. I know it's been a little bit of a challenge trying to do that, and I'm sure everybody's kind of freaking out there. So, people are asking me if I'm live. All right, people drinking in. Let me give it like another minute or two, and then we're gonna talk a little bit, give some updates, answer some questions. I think most of this stuff is pretty straightforward, but nothing like dancing on live Facebook, making an idiot of myself. That's what it's all about. Hey guys, lovely seeing you there. Just giving it a couple more minutes, and then we're gonna get moving. All right, everybody. So we got like a couple people trickling in. We're gonna do it. So let's get the conversation started. Let's start the Q&A. See if we can answer some questions and hopefully alleviate some fears and some thoughts that people have. So as ever, my name is Dr. Mark Wiseman. I am an emergency medicine physician. I currently am living in Los Angeles, but work as a traveling doc throughout the West and the Midwest. I hope everybody out there is feeling well, staying as healthy as possible, staying inside, and staying connected with your loved ones as much as possible. I know this is a challenging time for everybody. I encourage everybody to stay sane out there. Make sure that you are staying up to date as best you can, abiding by those guidelines. Obviously now I think people are realizing just how crazy this epidemic is getting. I'm starting to notice that it's getting pretty real out there. So as we do this, as always, knowledge is power. Make sure that you are staying up to date and doing your best to stay knowledgeable and doing the right things. And that's the best thing I can always ever encourage. So, all right. I do have to always give my disclaimer, so you feel free to zone out right now, not pay attention. My disclaimer is that everything that I say here comes from my own opinion. I am not representing or speaking for any organization, hospital, or hospital system. In addition, I cannot give out any specific medical advice. This is general information as I understand it, so don't take it. I can't give you anything specific. I also am an emergency medicine physician, which means my skills and training are very specific in that I'm not a surgeon, I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not even an ID doc. As with every physician and hopefully everybody on the planet, they can admit that there are certain things that we do not know. I don't know everything, so I'm going to try and give the most up-to-date and accurate information that I can based on what I know. But please, again, vet me, ask me questions. Healthy skepticism is definitely what you need. Thank you, Bree, for pointing out that I look like I need sleep, which is true. I am on overnight shifts this week. I am on very little sleep. So if I'm a little bit more disoriented and out of it than normal, it's because I'm very sleep deprived. But I'm still doing this because I think it's important. I think it's very valuable that we're trying to stay up to date and give the best information. And I want you guys all to be able to ask questions, try to get the answers for the questions that you have. So I'm going to start with things going in here with a basic update. I think these things are going to die down because I think most of you and most of the people out there are getting pretty good at following the news outlets, and I think they're getting more accurate. Not to be specific on how inaccurate or accurate some of the things are out there, but I think the general information is kind of coming together. As we have more information, things are getting more specific, but things are still evolving, and there's still questions out there, and I'm still getting questions about different things going on. So I know see some people are leaving. If you have questions for me after this, please leave them in the comments. I asked for people to leave them in the comments so I can answer them for anybody who might be watching, and then we can get that information out there. All right. So if you aren't aware already, here in the U.S., shit's gotten real. Mind my French. New York, New Orleans, Los Angeles, and even up in Chicago are seeing pretty significant increases in the disease. I looked today, so the resource that I've been using for the total number of cases and deaths in the U.S. is actually through the Johns Hopkins website. I found they tend to be the most up-to-date and most accurate. So right now we have gone up to 300,000 total cases, just over that in the United States, with 8,000 deaths. What is most significant about this is the rate at which it is rising. We are still seeing an exponential increase, which means essentially a doubling in the number of cases every day or few days, which is not good. Essentially what we were trying to avoid. I think at this point I have to get mildly political and say that, to me, I think our response and what has happened, we've kind of missed the boat. We haven't really been as effective as we wanted to, and we have not done a great job at curtailing the initial outbreak of the disease. Hi, Kathy. Nice to see you here. It's been amazing. So, you are. I'm going to answer your question later. So I think part of the thing now is people have to realize that we're going to be in a little bit of crisis management and damage control mode. It seems to me that the initial outbreak wasn't curtailed in the way that we initially hoped. It looks to me that some of the people not taking it seriously, still out there not doing the right things. See the spring breakers going out to Florida have resulted in this disease spreading a lot further than we liked. And so now we're going to be dealing with how we're going to manage it, what happens with people being sick, and what we can do. That does not mean that you need to stop social distancing. That does not mean that we need to not stop taking these things as seriously as we have been. I think social distancing is still the most important thing. I'll get into some of the treatments and things like that, and I will reiterate this, but we have to keep in mind that the number one way to survive this disease is not through treatment, but it's through prevention. We have to be mindful that, as with any kind of communicable disease, especially a virus, there's no good answer for a treatment that's going to wipe it out. Anything out there that's talking about a magic pill, in my opinion, especially at this point, there's no data out there and it's fake. We can't rely on it. It's not the safe thing to do. When it comes out there, if we have something that works magic, that would be great. There's reports of people getting better with different medications, but even the medications that are being used are not widely available necessarily at this point, and nothing is shown to be a truly magic pill, so we can't count on it. So there are people out there figuring it out. There's a lot of actual positive stuff. I've been in a lot of the groups and forums for the ICU docs. Is a lot of positivity coming. And our survival rates are getting up there, but we still have to be very mindful about just how much we're acting on prevention and making sure that we're focused on keeping safe as opposed to counting on treatments or anything coming down the line. Okay. I'm going to dive in. The next big thing that I really wanted to talk about, the major update, has to do with what's going on with masks and how this disease spreads, right? So I think it was 2 weeks ago, Dr. Kamel and I went on here basically saying that masks probably aren't helpful based on the way we understand the disease. It doesn't necessarily help us prevent it. So CDC came out, just recently, I think it was yesterday, the day before, and saying they are recommending masks for everybody. So I tried to dive into the articles and the research that's supporting this, saying, what's changed in the way that we understand it spreading, and does it make a difference? And frankly, from what I was able to find, I don't see any new information that's been out there or new research specifically that's dived into how we think the virus is spread. So let's break this down a little bit. So, and we talked about this, and the research was out there, I think it was about 3 weeks old, looking at the way that this virus was distributed in the air, how it survives in aerosols, and how it survives on surfaces. So this actual research article, this undertaking, what they did is they actually took concentrations of the virus, basically put it into a box and nebulized it, basically puffed it out into the box to try and determine if the virus would still be there in that air after a certain amount of time. And what they found is that there was a significant amount of virus in the air for up to 3 hours. Now, this is a controlled environment. This is not a person coughing out into the air. So what we got from that is we know that it can exist and it can survive in the air, but we don't really know from that for sure whether or not me and you breathing it out into the air, whether that's enough or significant enough for us to catch it. But it did suggest that that was a strong possibility, right? And so based on that recommendation, based on that research, we were saying that there is a possibility that it's aerosolized, okay? Now, a lot of the experts were like, well, maybe it's aerosolized, but we know that it's out in droplets. We know it's out this other way. So actually, let me take a second to break that down. When we talk about aerosolization and droplets, so when we speak about a disease being communicated through aerosolization, that's essentially through the microscopic or the super tiny water particles that come out every time you breathe, if I breathe out into the air. When we specify droplets, that's more being spread through coughing and sneezing, those big ones that you can actually physically see that are getting projected out to people. Now, we've known for some time that it spreads through those droplets. The question is whether it's aerosolized. Frankly, Dr. Kamel and I, based on that research, suggested that it is aerosolized, that you can get it from breathing. And so if I'm walking through a park and I'm breathing out into the park and someone walks through next to me, they can breathe in those particles and get the disease. And that's a reality. And that's that's what happens with chickenpox, right? Chickenpox can hang out up into the air for up to 30 minutes. So I think that that's a fair analogy. So the question becomes, what do we do about masks? In my opinion, it looks to me like there's no new data. The information's the same. But now as masks and the home masks are becoming more available, people are saying, maybe they won't help. We need to understand that the cloth masks and even the surgical masks that we're using in the hospitals don't necessarily provide significant protection against the aerosols. So that virus that's spread in my breath, that virus and those droplets are so small that they can actually sneak through the fibers in those masks and sneak around and still infect you, right? So it doesn't provide a full protection against that aerosolized virus. The only thing that actually is proven to provide significant protection are those N95s, which are out there. We're still encouraging people, the lay people, not to do it because there's not strong evidence it can be spread that way, but it's primarily spread and gone through the droplets, right? So let's sort of talk about the droplets. So that means, again, when I cough or sneeze, that kind of goes out into the environment, lands on things, lands on people, goes a lot further than people say, which is why this entire time we've been so strongly encouraging the hand washing, the social distancing, the good hygiene, all of that stuff, because it's more important. So the question in my mind with other people is, can those masks actually help prevent you from coughing and spreading out that disease and potentially get it. It might provide a little bit of protection for people spreading it, because if I'm coughing into a mask, then I may not be projecting it out into the environment and therefore preventing that kind of spread. The truth is, I think that masks and the cloth masks are going to become a thing that might be helpful. They might provide a little bit of assistance, but we can't assume a full sense of security. If you're wearing a mask, especially a cloth mask, you still have to maintain that social distancing. You cannot assume that it's going to prevent you completely from getting the disease, and we have to be very mindful of that. Even going back to looking at the interview done with Dr. Fauci, this is essentially what he said, and what he's talking about is that it might provide a little bit of assistance. It might help a little bit, but really we still have to hammer down on that social distancing, hand washing, and good hygiene. That's still the most important thing. It's not going to be a giant protection. You can't rely on it, not yet, not with the data that's out there. So we still have to be mindful of that initial precaution. So the other thing I have to emphasize is those who are going to be using the cloth or the homemade masks. I do think these are good things. I think that doing that is fine. If it can provide any type of help at spreading the disease, I want to promote it. Be sure that you're washing it regularly. You can't wear it every day. It has to be washed daily. There is a concern that if you're breathing into that mask, that moisture reservoir can act as a reservoir for the virus and actually lead you to being more susceptible to getting the virus if it's getting aerosolized. So we have to really emphasize that if you're going to do it, wash it. We have the disposable ones for medical providers. If they become available for everybody, great. Please make sure you're giving them to your medical providers. There is a critical shortage of PPE out for the medical community. Critical people out there. It's really getting dangerous. I don't know if people are hearing now, but medical providers, residents, young doctors are dying. Please preserve that for the medical community, especially those N95s. We really need it out there. Those are the people at most risk. A lot of facilities and a lot of places are ramping up their production, so I'm optimistic and hopeful that those supplies are going to be available in the coming months and we're going to be able to meet those needs. But right now it's very critical and we need to be really mindful of what we're doing. So my friends, as usual, are providing some nice trolling questions about, can you get Corona from the beer? Only if your name is Hussein Nasser, then you're not allowed to drink Coronas ever. You heard me. Let's see. And then Igor asked me if Carol did it. I almost started this. I want to start doing the intro where I'm doing, hey, all you cute cats and kittens, but I almost did it, but I didn't. I don't think she did it. I think she knows something that happened. I don't think she murdered him. She looks too innocent to me. That's going to be an unpopular opinion, but I want to see what people think about that. On a more serious note, I'm getting a question about, once recovered from this virus, can he get it again? Some people are being told that they would be immune to it. My understanding is the data still demonstrates that yes. Based on the data collected from SARS and the other viruses, we do think that once you develop an immunity to it, once you have it, in approximately 8 to 10 days is when your body ramps up an immune system. Sorry, Lorraine, I'm going off. When your body ramps up an immune system and develops those antibodies, you should be developing those antibodies for anticipated about 2 years. That's what we saw with the SARS virus. So that's our best predictions for what we'd see with this. Obviously, the data is very, very minimal and not really out there for coronavirus yet. We don't know. What I will say, and this is going to give me a nice caveat into my next thing with treatments, is what we are seeing with people that have recovered from the virus and are developing those antibodies is we have, in very small cases and minimally, we have been using those antibodies and that plasma from those patients to treat people that are critically ill with some pretty promising success, actually. There was a study, I'm going to forget. There's a study, I forget where it's from. I believe it's down in New Orleans, that took 5 patients that were critically ill and gave them the basically convalescent plasma or the isolated antibodies from patients who had recovered from the disease. And my understanding is they did well. All of them showed significant improvement, and a lot of them, I believe, they are recovering. So that's one of the big things when it comes to treatments. I want to talk about this a lot. So we have to understand it's interesting on the front lines and with the people that are out there treating this virus. So initially we thought we had a grasp and an understanding of how this virus affects people, the kind of disease process, how it goes, and getting a handle on how to treat it. Frankly, that has changed pretty dramatically. Our understanding about how this disease affects people, infects people, what organs it affects, and what happens has changed dramatically. Frankly, this disease looks like something different from what we've ever seen before. It's acting differently. A lot of my friends who are there seeing this every day are like, this is something totally new. I've never seen any patient act this way. I've never seen this kind of disease where people, their numbers look terrible, they'll look okay, or people will look okay and then rapidly decompensate. So it's a totally new disease process. It's something we've probably never dealt with before in the way that it affects the lungs. We think that it's now affecting the hemoglobin and causing infections there, affecting the way that your hemoglobin attaches to oxygen. And we're trying to figure out what we're supposed to do with this. This does talk about, why Plaquenil is effective. Is this something that we can actually use to treat people? Why that's effective, we're talking about different things. They are definitely seeing some success in the way they're treating people traditionally down in New Orleans. There's an intensivist group down there who's been treating this like the traditional pulmonary infection. They have seen success. They've been successfully extubating people. Obviously not everybody. This is still a pretty scary disease that's causing a lot of problems. But the treatments have been changing. The treatments have been evolving. We are seeing some success with that Plaquenil and azithromycin. That still seems to be the best thing. Once again, I still encourage people. This doesn't look like a magic bullet. Right now, we are still saving this this treatment for those who are critically ill. Right now, our understanding is that chloroquine and azithromycin really is only going to be significantly effective for people that are getting more severe versions of the disease and the virus, and therefore we're trying to reserve it for those people. Honestly, I'll be honest with it. I think there is some interesting data and some theoretical evidence that the Plaquenil and other medications could really significantly help with the treatment of this disease based on the new information on how it's working and how this disease is actually affecting people and the disease process. So I'm interested to see. I think, keep your eyes up and your ears out to see how we're going to treat this and what the treatment is going to be. There's really some, without going into all the pathophysiology and breaking it down, if there's medical providers out there who want me to talk about it, I can. It's been really intriguing. I've been diving into it. Some of how this works is really new and really interesting for nerds like me who enjoy the pathophysiology and the science behind it. But there's been a lot of good work out there. Some of this is actually pretty promising. Some of the methods that people are using to treat it is actually progressing. So this is a big kudos to, the other people out there. There's a lot of researchers. There's a lot of other people there who are really out in the front lines dealing this within New York, doing some of this more experimental treatment. And I think we're making waves and progress. So props to all you people. My love, I think, there's a lot of real heroes out there who are doing some really significant work, and, let's support them, and that's really pretty significant. So that's that. Where are we? We're sort of slowing down on questions. Okay to continue breastfeeding with suspected COVID-19 infection. Any new info on infant vulnerabilities? So, in fact, there is a little bit of information. I saw this. There was a specific study I read looking at vertical transmission, which is when you pass it to mother baby. Most of this is really minimal, somewhat actually encouraging. They are demonstrating that the mother if the mother's infected and she's able to create antibodies, even if a mom is getting pretty sick, she's developing those antibodies. And those antibodies are then being passed down in the breast milk and in vitro through the placenta, and then helping the baby, mostly through the breast milk. So that is actually promising. It looks like that's a major reason why newborns have a significant amount of protection. I've heard of the one neonate a while ago that was infected. I have not heard what the results of that are. If anybody knows that, please let me know. So most of that is actually relatively encouraging. They seem to be having a little bit of doing better, at least in our elderly population. The pregnant woman would be the person I would worry about. It sounds like the infants are okay, but I'm not sure of that. I'm not a pediatrician. Pediatricians out there that might know better than me, so hopefully that's helpful. Brian, if you have questions, please feel free to post them on there. I'm going to keep talking about stuff. Questions are trickling down, but yeah. So still going. So one of the other big things that everybody's asking about, people want to know about, are what's going on with vaccines. So I posted this on my page. So a lot of people are working on it. One of the big ones I saw, which I was most interested in, that I got into, was one out of the University of Pittsburgh, where it looks like they have not only developed what they think could be a vaccine, which they've tested on in mice, but an interesting and easily reproducible delivery system. So that's promising in the fact that we might have vaccines. Now, coming back, this comes with our caveat, which is that at best case scenario would be that this vaccine would be deployed and available for people in a few months, right? So just because something is tested and available for mice definitely doesn't mean it's available and testable and usable for humans, right? So in reality, it has to go through a vetted process to make sure it's safe and it's actually going to be effective in humans. And I know that that's been tried, and there's other clinical trials that are out there. So we cannot count on this vaccine for this current cycle of this virus and infection. We have to be mindful and be working on prevention and treatments. What this does mean, and what I'm looking forward to, is that in a year that talk about the reinfection, herd immunity, and what would happen next year. So potentially that means that these vaccines would be available to try and prevent that spread like we have it in the future, for future cycles, and hopefully reduce reinfection or co-infection rates. This kind of, I anticipate, might work like the flu, where we have to get a yearly vaccine based on the strains and the mutations that happen with the virus to try and prevent the yearly uptake of it. But it's not something that I anticipate necessarily being available to us within the next couple of months. It's still a matter of those preventions. Let's see, what else can I answer? I did have somebody ask me what they think would be the long-term outcomes of N95 use, asking for healthcare providers and things like that. I did look at 2 research articles on that, which demonstrate no long-term effects from N95 use or from goggle use, or I should say, other than discomfort and don't want to wear them. The N95 masks are very uncomfortable. They make your nose hurt, and they make it feel like it's hard to breathe. So no other long-term effects that we know of that has been studied and looked at in the past, other than annoying us healthcare providers and making us look silly when we have the creases on our face. But otherwise, no other significant other changes. Let's see. We talked about vaccines. We talked about treatments coming down the pipeline. Things do seem to be looking up in that sense. What's looking down is the fact that our infection rates are going up. Deaths are still pretty high. Still looks like overall mortality rates from the people that are positive for the disease, which means they are sick enough to have gotten tested. Looks like it's up to 5% at the highest part, which is pretty significant, right? So this isn't the flu. This isn't your run-of-the-mill cold. People are dying in much more significant rates. This is something that is really serious. Actually, something I wanted to mention, there's been different projections on how many people we think are going to die in the United States. Something I'm going to go out there and say is that, there are projections that up to 500,000 people can die from this disease in the United States. And to put that in perspective, I looked at the rates, the number of people that died in America, the United States soldiers that died in the U.S., which was 420,000. So that means we could see a higher death rate from coronavirus in the United States than we saw from World War II. Now, this might sound like fear-mongering, stuff like that, and I don't do this to spread fear. I certainly don't endorse panic. I certainly don't endorse people freaking out over this. We know what we need to be doing about this disease, which is quarantining, taking it seriously, changing our focus on a lot of production towards making PPE and making sure people are safe. One of the interesting questions that I will not necessarily have the answer to, but I think the big question a lot of people out there are asking is, what is the economic impact? And should we be doing this quarantine knowing that this could have significant economic effects, and what's going to be the toll on people from a financial standpoint, and are we going to recover? I'm not an economist. I'm not a politician, at least not yet. But in my mind, what's going to be the economic toll of 500,000 people dying in the next 2 months? If we had done no quarantine, there were projections that up to 2 million people could have died from this disease in a time frame of 6 months. What's the economic toll of that? I don't know. What's the moral toll of that? Pretty significant questions that we have to ask ourselves and say. The other thing really is, if we do not have, if we have that many people dying in the United States that we have to take care of, and our hospital system runs out of resources, like totally, we don't have medicines, we don't have fluids, we don't have IV kits, those things are gone. We could go back to, we could be seeing what medicine was like 20, 50, 100 years ago. And that means that all of these things that we count on, these medications, these the modern medical availabilities and luxuries that we have could be gone, right? Totally gone. That if you come in with a car accident, so your finger, you have tetanus, you get an infection. If those things are gone all of a sudden, what's going to be the impact on you and me? And what's further going to be the death toll of people not just affected by the coronavirus, but affected by us not having a medical system. Now, this is me obviously talking in extremes. It's really difficult to predict what things are going to be like in the next coming months, and what the actual implications and ramifications of this disease and that economic impact are going to be. I don't think anybody can truthfully predict. I think those of people who are saying this and that don't really know. It's hard to say. I think we have to ask ourselves as a culture and a country, what's more important to us? Are our lives more important? Is the economy more important? I do not have that answer. I talk about that a little bit with my YouTube channel, and I'm going to actually post the questions on the musings. What's the true value of life? Here as doctors, we say do no harm, which in my mind means try to prevent suffering, right? But those are the questions we have to ask ourselves as a community and as a culture to try and say what's important, how do we want to focus on things. Trying to pull this up to try and see some of these questions. I got a big one. So Brian here's asking me a couple questions to see if I can address them. First, he's saying, is it all right for the medical community and government to try medications, find out if they work? If they work, I understand it's not sure because it's not approved by the FDA. Is the FDA allowing brainstorming to take place? So the answer is yes, in that from a legal standpoint, most, if not all, of the treatments and the medications and things that we're doing are experimental. Physicians in certain cases, and especially in this emergency scenario, have been given emergency powers and emergency abilities to do appropriate use of medications. I'm probably butchering the terminology here, but we do have the ability as experts, right, as doctorates in the distribution and treatment of medical diseases to give medications based on our understanding and what we think is the best, most appropriate thing to do. It's a case-by-case basis. You know, back in the day, doctors were getting sued for doing things if they caused harm. Doctors were afraid to do this in a lot of ways because of the litigious nature of our culture in the United States. I think a lot of that's going away, but these medications are, you know, haven't gone through vetted FDA approval, and that's some of the concern, right? Because we don't know, but that's why we're using these, and that's why we're trying to figure out what works. Interested in reverting to my one-man business of making masks. What is needed? What is the standard? I'm probably not the best resource to tell you what exactly is the standard. I think there's other manufacturing guidelines out there. N95s are the optimal. If we can have an N95 for every person for every day, that would be a dream. That's not a reality at this point. That's not something we can expect. So we have to try and be focusing on that. Surgical masks are good. Again, we think that these could be helpful at this point. How helpful, we're not totally sure, but there are something we're thinking about. I live with elderly parents. How should I handle this? This goes back, and I think I addressed this in more detail in my other videos. Anybody that's at higher risk, we need to be very cognizant of how we're doing about them, what's the hygiene around them, making sure that we are trying to keep them as safe as possible, which means maintaining your distance. If you do have to come in contact, make sure that you are practicing that proper hygiene, make sure you're doing the hand washing. I think masks at this point are appropriate if we have the resources and the resources are there. And then just be as mindful as you can to, when you're coughing, touching your face, anything that's your saliva in your mouth, you want to prevent that from getting to the other person, right? So the best that you can do, everything that you can do to prevent that what your secretions that you have from getting into the other person, that's the best we can do right now. And then last thing, clean nose. I know you didn't ask me this before. I don't know that there's any real evidence about cleaning this out or if there's an effective way. I can't say for this one way or another. Please, for the love of God, don't go do the things with the hair dryer to your nose. That definitely does not work. That can actually make things worse. Can dry out your nose. That can decrease your body's own immune responses and your protective mechanisms, which are there designed to protect you and can increase your likelihood of getting the disease. Vitamin C and that stuff, there's no evidence that it helps. I'm a person, I think the more that you can optimize your immune system, which means give it the building blocks and the structures which it needs in order to build the things which it build the cells and do the active particles. I think that's a good thing. Zinc and vitamin C, I think, are okay. Don't go crazy. Please don't try to take tons and tons of it. More is not always better. You want to be at that nice range where your body is optimized to the point where it's doing what it needs to do. But don't treat it as a magic pill. It's not like any of these things specifically attack or affect the virus itself. It's just optimizing your own nutrition and your immune system. So focus on that. Shelly is asking again, is COVID virus airborne? Right now, we think a little bit. We know that it's spread, or the primary, I don't want to say we know. We don't know anything. Don't know anything. That's definitely one for me. The primary suspicion of way it's spread is with droplets, which is through the cough and sneezing. That's what we're primarily preventing based on what we know about SARS virus and those droplets that are out there. There is some evidence that it's aerosolized based on the initial research done through the New England Journal of Medicine. We know that it can exist in the air. We don't know if you actually spread it that way. That's just not known yet. Theoretically, it's there, so that's why we're talking about taking those precautions. We can go through. So how to prevent that? The only real way to prevent that 100% is an N95 masks. Some of the masks that you have can help a little bit. They don't help a lot. Stay away from people. Stay quarantined. Stay in your home. Do your best to stay away and keep yourself safe. All right. Whew, I talk a lot. I talk fast, don't I? Anyway, I'm getting sleepy here. I do have to start getting ready for work. I wanted to end this whole thing on some notes of positivity, right? So we want to stay positive out there. It's important to stay positive and optimistic, right? So we have to say we are seeing people coming off the ventilator, right? So we can see up to 100,000 people have come off the ventilator that are known and been tested and are recovering and are doing well afterwards. And remember, I talked earlier about there's evidence out there that we're able to take the antibodies from these people, give them to those that are critically ill, and they can help them recover and do better. So there's a lot of really positive and optimistic research out there towards the actual treatment and our understanding of this disease so that we can actually get a handle on it and treat it and treat those that are sick. So we are making progress, right? We are progressing our understanding of this disease. We are understanding how we can treat it, how it works. And there's some real evidence that we're making strides in how we're going to be able to approach this. I think there's no magic pill. Prevention's the number one cure, in my opinion, but we're making that things are positive. Lorraine asked one more question. For healthcare workers moving out of their homes, we are still saying, and I know for a lot of the people out there, especially if you're exposed, it's a mandatory 14-day quarantine. The big thing now is I think, we have to accept the reality that quarantine is going to be a way of life for a while. Quarantine for everybody, especially healthcare workers. They're asking healthcare workers to come back and go to work, so the restrictions are less. But that's with the understanding that we're at higher risk. We could be potentially spreading the disease more. And again, healthcare workers and residents are dying out there. So I wanted to end this on positivity. Maybe I didn't do it. Maybe it's a little bit sobering. We are making progress. I am going to be talking and posting about what's going on with healthcare providers. I think there's a lot of things that could have been done better. There are a lot of things that, there's a lot of sad stories out there, things we still need to do better to try and support our healthcare system and the healthcare workers. There's some real significant strides that need to be made and things people need to do. So I'm going to deal with that further. I think that's not really a topic I want to get into now, especially because I have to get ready to go to work and I have to go out there and treat people and get back on the front line. So I think at this point I am going to leave people. I'm going to leave you guys. Any further questions in the comments, make sure you leave them. If you're seeing this video late and you want me to answer something, I'm happy to do so. Anything and everything helps. And I hope you stay safe out there. I love you all. Appreciate you. And stay safe.